Stop it. You don't need to applause for me. Oh, no, really, stop it. Stop it. Cut it out. Okay, just a little longer. Okay, now stop. Okay, no more. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, and welcome to our second edition of Saint Stories with Father McShane. Today we're going to read the story of Saint Pius X. There's a picture of the cover. Saint Pius is giving out communion to a little boy and a little girl. Wonder why that's the front cover. Well, let's find out. A Story of Saint Pius X by Brother Ernest. Almost everyone in the little Italian town of Riese knew John Sarto. He was a shoemaker, and he made good shoes. Perhaps he made good shoes because he was a good man. John's wife, Margaret, was known by the Catholics in the town who saw her at Mass every morning. But that's about all they knew about her. Shoemakers didn't make much money in those days, but the Sartos had a little home and a garden, and they were looking forward to the day when they could own their own cow. Unless a man owned a cow, in those days he was very poor, and many were. But John and Margaret were very happy, and they were looking forward to the time when God would bless them with a baby. That day came on June 2nd, 1835. God gave them a son. "We will call him Joseph," said the cobbler. Margaret shook her head in joyful approval and pressed her little one closer to her. Mother Sarto dedicated her baby to Our Lady. She taught him early on to love her. Even as a tot, he loved to kneel before Mary's altar. Beppo loved to play with the children in the neighborhood. No one called him Joseph, but he often had to help his father in the garden or his mother in the house. He didn't always like to give up his play. At times it was a real sacrifice for him. Oh, I skipped a picture. Can't do that. There's Beppo playing. By the time Beppo was old enough to go to school, he had other brothers and sisters. These he had to help, and he did so in a gentle way that they just loved him. They trusted him in everything. Beppo was a bright student. He was really too bright for his class, and so he often had time for mischief. But the pranks he played were not too serious. They did, however, sometimes annoy their teachers. Here's Beppo playing some jokes. The teacher knew why Beppo was restless, but he could do nothing about it. He did, however, give the lad extra lessons after school, especially in Latin. One day the pastor called at the Sarto home. "Beppo is a very good student," said the priest. "He should be sent to the high school in Castelfranco." The Sartos were happy to know that their Beppo was so bright, and so they decided they would let him go there. It was a big sacrifice for them. They had to give up the idea of buying a new home in order to be able to meet the expense of Joseph's education. But Beppo, too, made sacrifices. He would take off his shoes and carry them. He walked barefoot to save his shoes. When he drew near to the city, he would put them on again, and that way no one knew of the extra pain his schooling cost him. There's Beppo walking to school. Shoeless Beppo, shoeless Joe. Then, one day when Beppo was in his 4th year in high school, his father, John Sarto, surprised all by saying, "Angelo will go to high school, Beppo, and I have bought a donkey and a cart so that you can ride." That was a great day for the boys. Beppo could study longer, for he did not have to leave his house so early. But the greatest day in Beppo's life was Easter Sunday in 1846, the day he made his first communion. He had been preparing for a long time. In those days, boys and girls could not go to communion when they were young like they can now, and we will see in our story how it was the same Beppo who years later granted this privilege. As soon as it was light enough to go out on that Easter morning, Beppo hurried to the church. He wanted to put in as much prayer as he could before he made his first communion. In church he would not be distracted, and there were so many things to pray for. Now that Beppo had made his first communion, he was looking forward to going to seminary. In fact, all of the Catholics in town were waiting to find out if Beppo had been accepted. The pastor had asked Cardinal Monaco to take Beppo into his seminary in Padua. One day, the pastor sent for Beppo. "My boy, you are to go to the seminary with 50 other boys to take the entrance test. You must win." There's Beppo applying to seminary. Yes, Beppo did win. He got the highest marks in all of his subjects. All Riese rejoiced the day the news came. They were happy to know that their Beppo was the smartest boy in all the towns in the province. Father Fusarini took Beppo to the tailor. "Make our Beppo a fine cassock. He is now a seminarian, and we want him to look his part." The tailor, too, was happy, and he made Beppo a fine cassock as he had. Beppo loved it, but he also felt a little awkward in it. Finally, the day came for Beppo to leave for Padua. It was hard to part with his mother, sisters, and brothers, but Beppo in his new cassock tried hard to be brave. He kissed them all goodbye, shook hands with many of his friends, and then got into the coach with his father, and set out on the longest journey in his young life. He was determined to succeed. Beppo was very happy in seminary. He studied very hard and took part in all the games. He soon made friends of his teachers and his fellow students. At the end of the year, he stood first in his class. At home for vacation, Beppo was the center of attraction. All wanted to hear about Padua, the city of St. Anthony. Beppo was happy to answer all questions, even while he longed to be back at school. There's Beppo answering questions about his seminary. Beppo's happiness during that second year in the seminary was broken by news that his father was very sick. "You must go home at once," said the rector gravely. Beppo arrived in Riese just in time. His father had already received the last sacraments. John Sarto recognized his son. He smiled a little, gave Beppo his blessing, and died peacefully. At first Beppo thought he should stay at home and work since he was the oldest. "No, my son," said Mother Sarto. "God will take care of us. You go back to your studies and do not worry about us." After Beppo talked matters over with his brothers and sisters, he felt convinced that all would be well, and he went back to seminary. Here's Beppo saying goodbye to Mama, going back to seminary. The next few years seemed to fly by, and the great day for Beppo's ordination came. The ceremony took place in Castelfranco Cathedral. Mother Sarto and her family knelt in the first pew and watched carefully as the bishop anointed Beppo's hands and gave him the great powers of the priesthood. The hopes and dreams of two hearts were realized that day. Beppo was now a priest of God. You see Beppo getting ordained, the bishop's hands on his head. Father Joseph was sent as an assistant priest in Tombolo, a town 2 miles from Riese. There he became famous for his sermons, his singing, his Gregorian choir, and his love for the poor. People began to think of him as a saint. The bishop too loved this young priest, watched him carefully, before long moved him to a much larger parish in Salzano. A few years later, Father Joseph's surprise, he was made a Monsignor and a member of the bishop's council. He accepted the honor regretfully, for he always wanted to remain a country pastor. The people of Salzano too were sad. They hated to give up this saintly priest who had worked so hard among them. Rather sadly, Monsignor Sarto set out for Treviso. In the cathedral town, Monsignor Sarto soon found himself head of the seminary, a job which kept him out of parish work to a great extent. But Monsignor Sarto got to know his seminarians. He was careful about all of their wants. Those who were sick he took care of himself. He had a great interest in their studies and gladly aided all who came to him. Then, one day, the bishop asked Monsignor Sarto to carry to the Holy Father in Rome a gift from the people of Treviso. He was very happy to go, for he had long wanted to visit the Holy Father and the many famous shrines in Rome. Pope Leo XIII received Monsignor Sarto warmly. Before he had left the Pope, he said, "I could have received no visit that would have been as pleasant as yours." That made Monsignor Sarto very happy. The holiness of his life, his humility, and his great love for souls, the church, and the beauty of divine worship all made Monsignor Sarto very dear to the Pope. And, to November 15, 1884, he consecrated him Bishop of Mantua. That day, too, the Holy Father gave the bishop one of the most beautiful pectoral crosses in the world. The saintly bishop was so amazed at the Pope's kindness that he could hardly talk. There's Bishop receiving his pectoral cross from the Pope. Bishop Sarto now hurried back to his home in Riese. His poor mother had not been well enough to go to Rome for her son's consecration as a bishop. Now on her knees she begged his blessing. Her poor heart was breaking with joy and gratitude to God for all he had done for her. Then the bishop hastened to Mantua to take charge of his new flock as a shepherd. Once in Mantua, Bishop Sarto took a keen interest in his entire flock. He urged people to receive the sacraments often. He visited the sick and the dying. He sought out the poor and did everything he could to help them. There were just not enough hours in the day for him to do all the things he wanted to do for God and souls. The time he could spare between his duties and charity, he spent in prayer. There's Bishop Sarto praying before the tabernacle, where Jesus is in the Blessed Sacrament. Then another great honor came to Bishop Sarto. Pope Leo chose him to succeed the Patriarch of Venice and made him a cardinal. Once again, Beppo hurried to his mother. She was now 80 and spent most of her time in a chair. Not long after this, his mother died. The cardinal sang her funeral mass. But Venice was not to have its cardinal very long. One day, word came to Venice that Pope Leo was dead. All the cardinals were called to Rome to elect a new pope. When the votes were counted, it was found that Cardinal Sarto had the most. In tears, he accepted the great office and took the name Pius X. The next day, Joseph Sarto was crowned in St. Peter's and at once set to work to restore all things in Christ. He lived only for that. There's little Joseph, little Beppo becoming the Pope. For 11 years, Pope Pius X ruled the Church. He reformed its music, gave permission for children to receive Holy Communion, encouraged daily communion for all the faithful, and did everything in his power to prevent the First World War. But rulers would not heed his words. War did come. The heart of the Holy Pope seemed to break with grief. He died on August 20th, 1914, at the age of 79. Miracles soon began to happen after his death, and his cause was begun in Rome, and on June 10th, 1951, Pope Pius XII declared him blessed. The whole world rejoiced at this great event, but the people wanted more. They wanted the Holy Pope declared a saint. This Pope, Pius, did on May 29, 1954. Today, you can see the incorrupt body of Saint Pius X in St. Peter's in Rome. Saint Pius X, pray for us. The end. What a great story of a little boy, a humble boy, who had a garden at home, and then he became a priest, and then a bishop, and then he became the Pope. How awesome. Saint Pius X, a great saint. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you on the next episode of Saint Stories with Father McShane.